as a design team, our goal is to walk our clients through the process. We want to be that advocate from start to finish, making sure that our customers and our clients are aware and that their expectations are aligned with reality, so that way we can see that come to fruition.
Welcome to the Level Design Podcast, a podcast for architects and engineers who want to thrive in this industry by creating more freedom, fulfillment, and financial security. Join us in uncovering how to restore value and honor to the unique people who choose to be designers and caretakers of our built world, and why it's essential to the future of our society, our industry, and our planet.
I think a lot of the question for a homeowner that's thinking about an ADU, the context of why they're considering the ADU in the first place. It may be a parent, or it may be bringing in different generations to live and, consolidate resources. It may be perceived as an additional income for the property. So the ADU, or additional dwelling unit, is starting to become, it's a new zoning consideration that's happening in a lot of jurisdictions, and a reaction to affordable housing has gotten to the point where the pressure of affordable housing is starting to influence the zoning. And it was stuck for many, many years, the density of residential units in an already platted, already zoned property or subdivision or original area of town, that we're finally going to say, look, it's okay. We got to get more affordable housing. Let's actually allow additional dwelling units on existing plotted lots. Long consideration. A lot of upset. This is not done. There's a lot of upset when the density and additional people, your neighbor might not be happy about your ADU. But in that context of that upset and that turmoil that's still going on, a lot of jurisdictions are just now forcing it, saying, we need to address it. It's okay to have an ADU, but here's our guidelines. Here's all of our rules for an ADU to try to pacify or compromise with the neighbor's upset, or the density issues, or the traffic issues, or the parking issues, or the additional dogs in the yard, all of these things, or the height of the ADU is going to interrupt my vision or my view to the sunset. All these things, all these rules and regulations are a compromise and a balance. It didn't solve the upsets that don't happen. But now, if you want to say you have an ADU, you're very site specific on your regulations. And the homeowner or whoever's considering this might want to initially go to the internet and try to find these plans. And one would say, totally logical. Why can't I just do that? Very unlikely. A lot of those plans fit your site-specific issues and your regulations. And that's kind of what we want to express in this discussion, is that it's going to take a design team to fit into the specifics of your specific area. So if I say ADU in California, that is not the same rules as ADU in Texas or Colorado or Boston or New York or Florida. Those ADU requirements are not the same. They're site specific. And so you're going to need a design team to fit your ADU context or your ADU needs into your site specific. And you're going to need architecture and engineering for that site specific need. To me, that's really the big misunderstanding, is that why can't I just get something off the internet, plug it in to my lot, and good to go?
Well, I would agree. And as a case study here for that exact discussion, just had a client who indeed pulled plans off the internet. And they came to Level Engineering saying, we recognize that we need some structural engineering as part of this project, but we already have architectural plans complete. And so they sent it off to me to look at. And so we started the dialogue of, this is a great for a floor plan and great elevations, but it excludes your zoning and planning code analysis requirements, excludes energy code compliance because it's not specific to Colorado, our specific region. And so we had that conversation back and forth of, you need this and that. And what I watched a homeowner playing this project manager role, or at least that they were trying to do, without understanding these requirements. And so what would happen is I would give kind of the general, here's what needs to be done, and here's what we can do this work for you and help you get that accomplished. And then I get a revision of that same architectural set with a couple extra comments or a couple extra notes that would be reflective of their limited understanding. And then rehaving that same conversation, like, okay, this is great, but there's a lot more to it than there is just, throwing in an R value into one of the wall cavities and saying, hey, we've met our energy, requirements for a thermal envelope. And so I see it quite often. And then the other disconnect, I think that it's the same disconnect, but it shows up in different ways, is when you're on site and you're talking to a homeowner, all they can think about is the finished product in their lot, right? And so that they don't see the step-by-step to even get to through the feasibility study, which Scott already mentioned, all the zoning requirements. Mm-hmm. And, Scott, you mentioned we're seeing differences from state to state. I still see differences jurisdiction to jurisdiction and within Colorado. And so, not to get nitty gritty, but it does come down to that specific site and the requirements for it. So yes, 100% agree. And I'm seeing it. Those are a couple examples.
Yeah, you might be in one particular community, even within the metropolitan area. The one community may say, hey, you have to have 2 parking stalls within the envelope and 1 outside. And then you may go to another jurisdiction and they don't speak to parking at all requirements. So in one jurisdiction, you may maximize that footprint area and make it livable space because you can. And you have on-street parking. And you couldn't take that idea and put it in the other jurisdiction because they want 3 parking stalls. So, and those are the things that a design team is going to have to research and work with you on your context of why you want an ADU. And then even the economic feasibility of what you're proposing, your design team can help you and really get you to the place where it's economically appropriate for you, or maybe even added value for if you want to sell the property. So a lot of these decisions are on your design team's going to help you with the return on your investment, your ROI. It's like, you can do an ADU and maybe it hurts you financially in the end, or even during. And are you really building something and you think it's going to help you, but you actually don't know, and you're actually going to end up hurting yourself and your value. So, and then your design team is going to help you with, those decisions of, hey, were you aware that you don't need parking and you can maximize your rentable square footage or your additional square footage and actually add value to your property, and those are the things your design team is going to help you achieve, where that knowledge, that influx of knowledge from your architects and your engineers and your design team, that fee is going to be returned 100-fold, 20-fold, 10-fold in your return on your investment versus not having that knowledge on your design team.
Scott, we talk about this in other areas too, with other projects, like going into, there's so many kind of like salespeople or companies that specialize in something and they want to get you to do the foundation repair, build the house, build the ADU, take out the wall. Like sometimes they're a little too quick without the right information and you end up wearing it in the end and it hurts you either financially or whatever. And this is another example I'm hearing is that it's so worth it to do almost like a feasibility study of some kind. Just look at what's possible. And if it makes sense for you to do this financially, is it going to add value? What's the process like? What's the actual cost and time? Because I would assume that the biggest misconception with ADUs is you can just find a design online, hire someone for like $50K to come whip it up. And then there you go. You're done in a few months.
Mm-hmm. Or even 20,000. I see that understanding of cost is real misunderstood. And I think that's where the ROI becomes the most powerful, is because once they absorb the real costs of putting ADU in place, that's when you can back it up to say, yes, it is maybe more than you were initially expecting, but let's talk about long-term gains.
Mm-hmm. Looking for a new opportunity? Interested in being part of an expanding network of independent engineers and architects who are thinking differently? Level Design Partners is on a mission to create prosperity for design professionals, the industry, and the world, using innovative business systems and a culture of collaboration. We believe that traditional education and firm structures want you to be a cog in their machine, depriving you of key skills needed to thrive, thus commoditizing an entire industry in the process. Gain access to skills, tools, and systems by partnering with Level Design Partners. Learn more at leveldesignpartners.com.
Can we walk through kind of like, it does sound like, it has to be tailored to each location and specific project, but can we walk through kind of like a general process that just to kind of illuminate how this really works? And then can you kind of plug in like so if we're speaking to a homeowner, property owner, and then where does the realtor come into play? What should they know? What about the contractor? What should they know? Like, can we kind of speak to everyone and just walk through this process?
Well, I think that, there's a lot, that happens in the initial discussion. And that on-site meeting, I think, is really powerful. That face-to-face conversation. What we're doing is to help provide a lot of information, for homeowners before we even jump in necessarily, or at least provide extra resource. But on I think the feasibility is, the turning point is kind of the key to the whole project, in my opinion, based on my experience. When you understand the goals of the homeowner, and then especially with our experience in different jurisdictions to say, hey, we've done this down the street. Let's take your scope and your goals and let's kind of hone in on them. And then once we have a grasp on that, we oftentimes, at least I'll speak for myself, I oftentimes will then have them contact their own realtor. If they have realtors, say, hey, what is your ROI on this project to add X, square footage, and what are your rental rates for this type of project? And then what is the resale value that comes out of it too? And then once they feel like, because in my experience, what typically turns off the project faster than anything else is perceived cost and ROI first. And so having that conversation is important. Now, for our clients who've already done some of that work, and they've already had those conversations and they feel very well researched in that arena, then my next step is that jurisdiction, code review. We're going to look into what is actually possible. Maximum structure heights, bulk planes that are specific to ADUs. What about utilities? That's another big one too that we see a lot where it's missed, as well as, are we adding demand to the existing supply that's going to add $20,000 to your project? So this is all part of that initial feasibility at a high level, at least.
And don't assume that all of the stakeholders and players are pro ADU. A lot of the utility companies are not happy with this legislation, and they've not made it easy. Depending on where you're at in the country or jurisdiction-wise, the utility companies are a separate entity, and they may not be in love with, if your sewer's in the alley, that changes the project. If the sewer's in the front street and you put the ADU in the back, that may be a $40,000 ad, because you got to get the sewer from the back ADU to the street. And that's not going to be easy digging next to the house and all those things. So the utilities are very complex, and don't assume they're friendly. You're going to need that design team to help you navigate both the cost, get the accurate cost of that. So if a person's thinking about ADU and they go to the contractor community and they get a quote and there was no consideration for setbacks, I can't do 2 stories. I have a utility easement that it didn't know was 20 feet, not 5 feet. I didn't know that the sewer was in the street. The contractor hasn't looked at any of that often. And so all of a sudden you're moving forward with the contractor and you find out later, too late, that all these costs are hitting you, or all these barriers are hitting you without a feasibility study first, and you're already in trouble. So that's what that design team value add is. Hey, I know the feasibility of this project, my return on investment. I've talked to my real estate community about all this before I started digging with a contractor. So that's the big value add. In our design teams, your engineers and your architects are actually your advocates for your project, and encourage people to look at your design team as not an unnecessary cost. It's actually the person and people that are going to get your project viable for you. So you're making good decisions, not getting yourself in trouble with your project financially. So if you can start looking at your design team as your advocate for proper decisions, rather than an unnecessary cost, that would be my advice.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I may also, I think as part of that too, maybe a couple bullet points to help line it out, is that our architectural design, we typically break it out into 4 phases. That first phase, that feasibility, before we begin figuring out where bathrooms and bedrooms are going to interface and where windows are going to be, which walls windows are going to be in. And as part of that feasibility...
And that's a fun phase, right?
It is.
It's a super fun phase, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that once we get through feasibility, that's when everybody typically, you see an inaudible sigh sigh of relief, like, oh, okay, great. Now we can do the parts that we can start picking out interior paint colors, things that show up. But as part of that initial feasibility, there's also involved survey. We talked about the zoning requirements, but a lot of people don't recognize that survey is required to understand where your property lines truly are, especially if you haven't had one done for your property for years, or, if something changed in the last 20 years or previous ownership. And so that's another one that when we get to that feasibility, we still have some other prerequisites to knock out too.
Yeah. There's these other things too, like impervious area. Mm-hmm. When you add additional impervious area or roofs and sidewalks and driveways that don't allow water to absorb in the ground, impervious area add is actually regulated, and it's regulated for a reason. If we pave over entire urban area, there's a lot more water getting to our rivers and our creeks, and they flood. So there's a restriction on how much impervious area you can put on properties often with this additional roof and driveways and areas. So you might have to take away some sidewalks, and that feasibility study is often in looking at this impervious area aspect of like, hey, you can't just pave over your whole lot. You might have to take away some service walks or some other driveways to meet the ADU, and it gets really complex. So you actually have to survey these lots, and you have to survey the impervious area, and you actually have to prove to the jurisdiction that you're not over paving or creating more impervious area, because those rivers and creeks flooding, other people that are adjacent to those things and all those other infrastructure assets can't be flooded just because an ADUs are being added to the community. So these things get really complex really fast.
Yeah. Well, and I think one other thing I make mention too is I get a lot of question of what happens if we get to the end of the feasibility study and we can't make this work, or, we are going to be encroaching in our setbacks too much, or we can't get 2 stories out of this because, our maximum structure height for ADU is lower than we like it to be. The one that I get a lot too is, hey, I have an existing 2-car detached garage that I want to put an ADU on, but the garage is already in the setback. What do we do then? And then we start talking about variances and going to the board and talking through and getting essentially allowance to continue, through whatever means we can. So that's another process in of itself too.
Creative solutions, the design team can bring creative solutions, ask for variances, because the ADU is a motivation by the community to get affordable housing. And often there's a balance, and there's public hearings, and there's variances allowed, and your design team can help you through those variances and those compromises with your neighbors and maybe get approval, right, Steve? Maybe you can get approval with a lot of these things with a little compromise and achieve that ADU, and that design team can help you get to those solutions that are even outside of the existing zoning. It's a unique time. Affordable housing is the driver, and it is important. So your committees and your planning and zoning departments are listening to get creative to achieve this affordable housing aspect. So there is a way to get through compromises and zoning variances, as Steve said.
I have an annoying question, so answer this however you see fit, but a lot of people are just like, what's the price? Like, how much does this actually cost? And I know there's probably a huge range, because ADU technically could be size of a little shed, or it could be huge, right? So I guess just generally, like, is there anything you could speak to about what the actual cost of this thing is? Like, are people underestimating? Why are they underestimating it? What are they underestimating? And like, is it more often a good addition financially for a homeowner, or more often is it like idealistic but not really worth it when you do the math?
All of those things.
Yeah, kind of just like went across the board, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, so like if I wanted to add an ADU, should I think closer to like 100 to 300K?
So I'll speak from my experience. How's that? And my experience has been that actually many of my clients, the ADUs have all been very similar in nature. There's kind of this preconceived ADU concept, I feel like, that people have grabbed onto because they've seen it done. So it's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath living area, or it's a studio. It's either poppy on top of an existing garage, or maybe you're building the garage with it. I will say that to date, I have not seen an ADU that's less than 100K to build. That's my experience so far. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but most of the projects that I've worked on in this range have been probably in the $100,000 to $180,000 range. That's what I can speak to my experience.
Perfect. Yeah. Well said. That's what I was looking for.
It's site specific, Miles, too. I mean, if you're in a region that has affordable labor or has less regulation versus if you're in building an ADU in New York City or San Francisco or your higher end urban areas, the labor's higher, the land's worth more, the construction costs are higher, and you can see 2x, 3x costs just depending on where you're doing it, to be honest with you. So homeowner or somebody considering this may be tempted to go Google cost per square foot for a single family home construction. And what you're going to get back is the cost of an average square footage. So let's say it's $150 a square foot, $200 a square foot to build a single family home. Now, when you're talking ADU, it's a much smaller footprint. You still need a bathroom. You still need a foundation. You still need utilities. So that cost that you got from the internet is actually half of what it's going to cost an ADU because of the scale of the square footage. So a bathroom cost is a bathroom cost, and that's high. A kitchen cost is a kitchen cost, and it's high because of fixtures and plumbing and heating stuff. So caution there. But my advice is your ADU in general is going to be higher than a single family square footage to build because of that. And talk to your realtor about value add. Look at your return on investment for rental to pay down or increase your equity. And these are financial equations. So if your marketplace says an ADU is going to add $400,000 to the value of your property and it's going to cost you $200,000 to build it, there's your decision making. If you're going to only add $100,000 to the value of your property, but it's going to cost you $200,000 to build it, maybe that's not great.
Gotcha.
No, I was going to say, it always takes longer than people want it to take from start to finish. Yeah. It's never a 3-month process. And so Scott already reiterated this and say it again, as a design team, our goal is to walk our clients through the process. Even while construction is taking place, our design team's on standby for questions that come up, or concerns or discovered site conditions. So that way, we want to be that advocate from start to finish, but it does take some time. And so I think a lot of it is just making sure that our customers and our clients are aware and that their expectations are aligned with reality. So that way we can see that come to fruition.
Yeah. The thing I'd like to express is that whenever ADUs or homeowners or homes, we get very focused on what we believe our needs are or our desires are. So when you're designing an ADU, you may have a vision for yourself and how you're going to use it. And that design team will help you achieve that. But also a design team may say, how long are you going to keep the property? What's the intentions of the property? And they're going to coach, the design team's going to coach you into decision making. And it may be realized that your goals for the property are only 5 years into cash in on your equity and your investment. And if that's the case, your design team's going to go, well, okay, great. But I think we should change this ADU design because it's actually not attractive to the next buyer, what you're proposing. That may be a very interesting, eye-opening experience, is to say your ADU idea for you may not be attractive to the market, and that your design team is going to help you through that process.
That's how you secure that resale.
Yeah. You don't build a white elephant that can't be sold.
Got it. Wow. Well, thank you guys. Is there anything else before we wrap up?
Where's the dog going to go?
Doghouse? A dog ADU?
Yeah, we got 2 dogs in the yard now. What do you get? 2 families in the yard. How are you going to separate them?
That's a good point.
Use of yard space.
Use of yard space. Yeah. Let's solve that one.
Yeah. There are jurisdictional requirements for that. I've seen too. Some require fences. And it's like clear delineation of use. It's interesting.
Yeah. It is interesting.
Stephen, thank you for this. Really appreciate your insight. And my biggest takeaway here is ultimately hire experts that know what they're talking about, that can help you navigate all the details and take your time before you move forward with actually building anything, because you never know what's around the corner. Talk to your engineer, architect. And later this year, we're going to do a live workshop and have a couple experts on and really dive into this ADU, everything about ADUs, the details, the process, and even do Q&A with a live audience. So that'll be fun. Look forward to that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Miles.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. If you found value in this episode, support us by sharing it with someone or leaving a review. In upcoming episodes, we'll discuss the realities of the industry today and what the future may look like. It's our belief that positive changes for architects and engineers is not the obligation of the industry, but rather a choice you make to reimagine how we work together. We invite you to join us in creating a world in which design professionals thrive. Learn about our mission and get involved by following us wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribing to our newsletter at leveldesignpartners.com.